everybody. Thanks for joining the Successful Mind podcast. Today, David and I are going to be talking about the recession, both how to get your head around it to actually thrive during this time, and also how to support your team in navigating some of the fear that's out there in the marketplace right now. Give it a listen. Hope you enjoy it.
You're listening to the Successful Mind podcast.
Successful people learn how to make their minds work for them.
We are Life is Now, and this is the Successful Mind podcast. Hey, David, how's it going?
Great. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
We're plugging into the new year here. We're just like trucking along.
January, the never ending month of January, according to you.
Yes. Well, that's the way that it feels for some reason. I should change my reframe around that.
Maybe you should plan some trips in January or something. Okay, so today I want to talk about an important topic. We got a question from one of our Elite Mind members that I think warrants a podcast episode, honestly. Now, you've addressed this with the group. You did a whole teaching on it. And, you know, instead of like trying to repurpose it and whatever, I thought you and I would have a conversation about it. And just transparently, you know a lot more about this than I do. So I don't know what I can add to the conversation, but I can definitely ask questions.
Yeah, sure.
About it. So I'm just going to read off my phone the question that we got from our Elite Mind member.
Okay.
And I think when we answered this question, a lot of people said, yeah, I have the same question. So here we go. So she writes, it's not consistent, but I find myself slipping into the negative mindset here and there, and I've got to stay focused strong on my belief that this recession is not going to, quote, take us down, quote, and that we can actually grow through this. People are still investing and spending. I've got a team of 12, some of whom are scared. I'd like to keep this light and bright. Is there a recording or talk about recession and mindset that can help me?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to leave it at that and kind of let you just take it from here.
Okay. So I have been through several of these recession things now, 3 times now in business, I guess. And
that seems impossible, seeing as how you're 35.
Yeah. Well, you know, being that young is an amazing thing. I wish everybody had the fountain of youth in their backyard that we call Lake Norman, but not everybody does. So sorry about you. No, seriously though. I've been through this. So I have an interesting personal story around this that I'll tell first, and then I'll go into what the details are.
Perfect.
So when I was trying to find my way in the world in my youth, one of the first places that I got a job was for Metropolitan Life Insurance, and I was selling life insurance policies. And this was from 1988 to 1990. And I was actually doing relatively well in the beginning. Like I was showing some promise. I was learning. I was an eager student. I had a great work ethic, and my income was starting to build. Now, the interesting thing about life insurance is that the real money doesn't come from first-year commissions. Specifically, it comes from renewals, right? So you have first-year commissions on top of policy renewals, and you get a percentage every year. It does taper off over a period of about 7 years, but it can be substantial based on how much you're writing over what you've written last year. Like it could be big money.
So your earning potential is pretty much unlimited.
Pretty much unlimited.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then they have like it's actually a really cool place to work, because there's all kinds of trips and things that you can qualify for, you know, like there's prestige, there's recognition. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool industry. And I kind of stumbled across this because I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. My stepdad had happened to work for MetLife. He did relatively well. And he's like, why don't you give this a try? You know? So I was like, I don't know. And so I went in, I tested, I got my licenses to be able to sell all different kinds of insurance. They had to wear a suit every day. You know, it was like a complete, total change for me.
Wait,
right?
Time out. You wore a suit every day?
Every day. Tie. Shirt, tie, jacket.
I'm shook. You wore a
for
suit
2
every
years.
day.
For 2 years.
Dang.
Yeah.
All right.
So things are going well. And then all of a sudden the savings and loan crisis happens right at the end of the 80s. And what I didn't know, because I don't know that anybody knew this at the time. And if they did, I don't know that they would even have been able to teach it to you, right? Maybe people that were in the upper end of the statistical end of life insurance might have known this and, been able to do something about it. But I don't even know how they would have handled it on a training level for new insurance salesmen coming, right in the front door. This savings and loan crisis is basically another recession. And the first thing is that everybody that you sold insurance to that is on a fixed income, the first thing that they're going to drop is their insurance policy, right? So inflation's going up. There was all kinds of problems that were happening, in the economy. And if the person was a working class person, which is who I was selling life insurance to, their income went up everywhere. What's the last thing that they need? Life insurance. Right? Because I was selling it to people that are in their 20s and 30s, people basically kind of starting out in life. It's more of a luxury. That's how it's actually looked for. Very few could actually even see the investment wisdom in like a whole life policy, which there's some substantial wisdom in that.
Right.
So every day I'm coming in and they're one after another policies dropping. My check's going down, 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 down. And I'm not able to keep up with first year commission sales to offset it because we're going into this crazy savings and loan crisis. And the news makes it 100 times worse than it is because all they do is preach doom and gloom. The whole world is falling apart. The moon is going to bash into Earth. Like everybody's going to die.
I think the significance of that is that causes people to make decisions not based on what they need to be making decisions on.
Right.
So you've got people pulling out of their life insurance policy who really are not affected by the increase.
That's right.
But they're being told that they will be or that it's coming soon. And so they're making decisions based on assumptions because that's what the news is.
Completely out
warning.
of fear.
Okay.
Completely out of
Gotcha.
fear. Anybody that's managing their money goes through those times okay. Does it cost them a little more? Do things get a little tighter? Yeah, absolutely. But the people that don't manage their money well and they're really living, hand to mouth, it affects them the most, So anyway, this is happening, and I'm not able to continue to pay for. I had bought a new car, right? I was able to buy my first brand new car. My wife and I, not just me, and we had 2 kids, and we moved from kind of a scummy first apartment to a nicer apartment, right? Let's just say what it is. We're trying to climb. We're climbing. We're young. We're in our early 20s. I was like 24, 20. Let's see. I was 20 in 86. So that would maybe like 22 when I started there. Now, I don't know where to go. So I end up having to go to a laborer position because I didn't have any skills. So there was a lot that I didn't know. If I knew now, then, what I know now, back then, there's no way I would have ever went to a forklift because I would have recognized I had the ability to sell. I would have found something to sell.
Okay.
Right. I would have gone at least that route. I did have a skill. I just didn't know I had a skill. And nobody pointed out to me that it was actually a valuable skill, which was really interesting.
I have known you for forever, and I didn't know it was the savings and loan crisis that caused you to end up on a forklift.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was because I didn't see my value anywhere else. And I didn't have any others because I quit high school at 17. I went in the Army, right? I got my GED, but I mean, I still didn't have any skills.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of I could have been a cop, but I could make more money on a forklift than I could being a police officer. Yeah. And a police officer, you had to start off working nights in bad neighborhoods. I got 2 little kids. Like it just didn't seem to be a fit. Yeah. And I didn't have any passion to be a police officer. It was just something to do in the Army, you know? So, so anyway, I go on the forklift, and then everybody knows the story from there. Everything goes to hell in a handbasket. I lose everything, and I have to figure out a way to climb back up. Now, fast forward. So if we go from, say, 1990 to the year 2000, we go through. So I'm just starting my business at the end of 1999. I'm starting to move into the business. It's starting to pick up a little bit of steam, and bam, 9/11 happens, right? It spins us out. We're now in another recession. So one of the things that I did was I started studying then, because I needed to figure out, how do I get through this, right? Because I heard, well, my mentor told me, he's like, dude, you can make way more money in a recession than you can out of a recession if you know what you're doing,
Right.
which intrigued me. Like, okay, so this is a mindset thing. There's a lot of mindset here. So I began to study, and I found one of the things that I found out that completely changed my mind about any kind of economic crisis that we go through is that we go through a recession regularly every 10 years. You can track it like you can track a time on a clock. And it's necessary. It's an actual part of the way that the capitalistic economy works. It has to reset itself at some point, because we go through inflation and prices going up, it becomes out of balance. And then we need a correction in the market to come in to balance it. And sometimes they create it on purpose. Sometimes it happens on accident. Sometimes it happens, nobody knows how it was done. Like, that's irrelevant. The thing is that
Right.
every 10 years, like clockwork, it happens. And as I was studying that, I also found out that we go through a major tragedy every 20 years. And when I first learned, I was like, what? Is this actually real? And I'm looking it up, and the recession thing was 100% real. And then the person that was teaching me this was going, okay, so we're at nine. This is when we were at 9/11. Like, we're 9/11. He goes, go back 20 years. What happened 20 years ago? And we were in the Cold War, in the heat of the Cold War, right? Which I experienced how it affected the world much differently when I was in Europe, when I was in the Army, than people knew in the United States. But we were on the edge of nuclear annihilation for a long period of time, and people didn't even realize it. You go back 20 years before that, what do we got? Vietnam.
Right.
20 years before that, what do we got? World War II, right? And then in that time frame, you also have the Korean War that took place. You got some small skirmishes that took place in the 80s. There were also, you had like Grenada, the invasion of Grenada, and all the small skirmishes around there with Reagan. Go back before that, it's World War I. And it just keeps going back every 20 years. So the fact that there were actually, whenever you notice a pattern or a cycle, you can make predictions. Now, you may not be able to predict everything that's going to happen or how it's going to affect you, but you know that something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So just the fact that you know that something is going to happen allows you to keep your head in more of a sane place. Because here's the other, and many people now know this story also, which I didn't say. In 1932, when we went through the Great Depression, there were more millionaires made during that time than any other time in history up to that point. So it was like, it wasn't just a bad thing for the way that it affected people on the bottom of the community. It actually had a positive effect for a lot of people, right? So what
you
caused...
You don't hear about that, though.
You don't hear about that.
Right.
And it's almost sacrilege to even say that in the face of how many people were in breadlines and lost everything. But it's the truth. And if you don't understand the flip side of it, you don't understand that actually you have a choice on how you go through this. When I started to first learn about the idea that there were millionaires, many, many millionaires made during the Depression, I was thinking to myself, what's the difference there? Because I didn't know at the time when I was first learning it. And I'm thinking, so if there were people that became millionaires and there were people that lost everything, maybe even people died being on the breadline, somewhere in there has to be either knowledge, education, the ability to choose, understanding something, like something's going on there that's not being revealed to the average person walking down the street.
Yeah.
So I've been teaching people. So then we had 2000 and 2001, and then we had 2008 with the housing crisis, right? Which hit everybody really hard. It hit our business hard about a year into that problem because the credit limits were slashed. And most of the people that buy from us are using credit to be able to do that. So we had to figure out how to overcome that as a company. I had to figure out how to overcome it in 2001 also, which was very different than 08. And then now we're going through it again. So here's a couple things to understand, just foundational, that will help any person. Number one, it's a cycle, and it's a cycle that happens about every 10 years. And it coincides with a cycle that happens about every 20 years, which is some huge kind of catastrophic war or something.
Or pandemic.
It takes place, or pandemic, right? So, yeah. So here's one I didn't mention. What was it? 1914 or 18, the flu pandemic, right? In the teens. It happened in the teens there, right? And it killed 30 million, 150 million people. I think it was 150 million people died from the flu in 1918. Yeah. Okay. So these things happen on a consistent basis, which I find absolutely fascinating because where there's a pattern, there's a causation, right? So we could go down that road too. But the idea that people need to be aware of, number one, it's a pattern so that you can expect it to happen. That coincides with the law of rhythm.
Yes.
Right? So 7 natural laws to the universe. One of them is the law of rhythm. And that's everything operates in a rhythm. There's good times, bad times, there's ups, downs, there's in, outs, right? All business operates by rhythm. All economies operate by a rhythm. If you understand that there's going to be great times in an economy and down times in an economy, understanding that gives you the ability to go, okay, how do I get through downtime? What do I do with my business? What do I do with my savings? Where do I look for other opportunity, right? Because where one opportunity gets canceled out because there's a financial issue or a relativity issue, there's other opportunities that open up. So this is all something that a person can learn about in a way where you don't become an ignorant victim of the problem. Okay. So now let's put that aside, because here's where the major issue comes from, that you're not taught this and that the news turns it into the world is going into Armageddon, right? Everything is going to completely fall apart.
Yeah.
And we're all going to die and we're going to starve and we're going to horrific deaths. And, you can't trust the government. You can't trust this, that, or the other. The ideas that they plant in the mind of the public that are basically just for propaganda, right? To get them to do the thing that they do, because it's like the old idea, where it bleeds, it leads, right? So the more horror that we can put in the news, the fear is the most stimulating principle of the mind, right? As far as controlling people's minds, you put them in fear and they'll basically do whatever it is that you tell them to do, because they're not thinking logically, because they're thinking in fear. So they get this every day, and they automatically believe no matter what they do, they can't get out of it. It's going to affect them in a bad way, which is basically what you were reading to me from the client that sent that question in. Like, how do I know that everything's not going to, we're all going to go up in a puff of smoke because of this issue?
Yeah.
That's a propaganda. That is one of those mimetic memes in the mind, mind virus type ideas. It's like totally controlled the mind. So now I don't see a way out, and it's made me helpless, and there's nothing that I can do about it. So that's where that comes from.
Well, it creates victims, right? I mean,
totally.
You're a victim of the recession when actually it's just a cycle. It's something that happens naturally, and you don't have to be a victim of the recession, right? I mean, something that we did with our clients when the pandemic first happened, this was like March of April of 2020, is we helped them see other opportunities in their business that they didn't see because they didn't have to see it, right? So it was an opportunity to innovate. Most things that happen that are quote unquote negative in the world in business are opportunities to innovate.
Right.
And when you can put aside that I'm a victim of this, I have no control over this, and you can think about it in a different way of, actually, how can I innovate through this? How can we grow through this? Like, what opportunities is this creating for us that weren't there before? You can actually be one of those people that makes money during the Great Depression, right? Because
Absolutely.
You're thinking about it in a different way. And you mentioned the laws. It's the law, right?
It is.
There is, for every bad situation, there's an opportunity. There's a gift, right? That the law of polarity. Is that correct?
Yep. Was it, like in 2000, it affected our company in 2009. We actually made more money that year than we made the year before, just because of that principle. Because we overcame that problem, it allowed us to help more people through a very specific niche problem that we were able to actually do. And it also it allowed us to broaden a little bit who we sold to on top of that.
I remember, the program we ran was called Recession Rescue. And it was really about teaching people how to see things, see things differently.
Yep. And all of our laser coaching programs came out of that.
Yes. Yeah. It was like, let us help you see the opportunity that you're not currently seeing. We know it has to be there.
Yeah, it has to be there.
You're not going to convince us that the opportunity is not there. And it was the same thing. It was the same thing for when the pandemic hit. Like, you're not going to convince us that there's no opportunity here, because we know the truth. We know that somewhere in this, there's a huge opportunity for you that you're not seeing because you're getting mired down into all the things that are wrong about this.
Right.
And how you have no control and all of that.
Yeah. That's why you have to really take the propaganda with a grain of salt, because it's mostly designed to manipulate you. It's not designed to help you in any way. So educating yourself, especially during times where it's not all that bad, understanding what's happening allows you to do really significant changes in the way that you think, because you start, instead of looking for what's not going to work, you start looking for where can I actually solve a problem. If you remember, first and fundamentally, what is the core of your business? You problem solve. All business is problem solve, right? Yes. You don't want to become the problem that somebody else has to solve. You want to solve other people's problems. Now, this is something that's interesting, because this is also a truth that exists during good times also, not just necessarily a recession. You have to ask yourself the question of what is the value system of your current client base, the people that buy from you? Like, where are they in the spectrum of what's important in their life? Because if I go all the way back to when I was selling life insurance, I was basically selling to the equivalent of myself.
Right.
Back in those days, I was looking for working class folks, young people, and I was selling like to people that I would hang out with. It would have been friends, right? Trying to figure a way to get them to realize that life insurance was something that they actually needed. Young parents, people, newlyweds that got married, that type of thing. And the part of the problem was that their value system was mostly based in survival. It wasn't an expansion. They were just trying to survive. So when something came along that threatened that survival, anything that was not part of the sinking ship had to go. So life insurance was out the door. I didn't know that then. I didn't know that had I been conscious, had I known that recessions were something that happened every 10 years, had I understood everything that we're talking about now, I could have approached my business in life insurance much differently. I could have went after people that had more money. They weren't living on the edge of survival, and they bought for different value reasons, right? And whether they bought or didn't buy, it had nothing to do with whether or not they were surviving. It was, how is this thing that I'm buying actually changing my life? How does this solve a problem? What is they're much more competent about the decision-making process that they do when you get older also, and you mature more. But I didn't know that at the time. So I was a victim of my own ignorance in that moment. And of course, there was something good out of it that I pulled out of it, but it took a long time to do that. And I think the point is, right now, one of the things that you have to ask yourself is, what is the mindset of my current client base? If things start to go wrong, does everything get scrapped because of survival? Is that where they are in their mindset? Or do they buy from a different value perspective, right? So these are people that they're not sitting there trying to figure out how they can get something for nothing, or, bending around Sunday cutting coupons out of a magazine or something. These are people that go out and buy things because they see the value in the thing that they buy. They understand that value. They're willing to trade money for that value. They have no issue there. That is a much different client that a person wants to have, or prospect, or when you're thinking about your business, understanding the value of why a person would buy from you is extremely important in how much is this going to affect your business if there's a downturn.
Well, we're so across the board in the consulting industry. This isn't like a national study. This is just my experience, and I'm part of many groups of consultants.
You're groupie.
Coaches. I just like people.
I'm just being fun.
Yeah. And the conversation recently has been, in order to really grow during a recession, you have to focus on the people who aren't affected by it. Which
that's
is
the conversation you're having in
which is
the mastermind groups you're part of.
What you're saying.
Yeah.
Like if you're selling a low dollar program to a beginning business owner, chances are you're going to be affected by the recession because they're not in a place where like they're going to duck and cover. They're going to squirrel the money away. They're basically going to duck and cover. If you focus on a higher end, higher level client that's not as affected by the price of cauliflower, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Then you're going to have less of an impact on your business. So this is really, I find that this is really a calling to really serious consultants to step into their value and really look at who they're targeting. So it's what you're saying is completely in line with what I'm seeing in the marketplace and what I'm hearing from fellow, multi-million dollar business owners.
Yes. You say something here that's pretty interesting also. This kind of just popped into my head. So you're hearing this from people that, and our listeners might know this, but I know this because we talk about it. You're talking about very well-established business people that you consult with and that you work with. Okay.
Oh, many of them have way larger businesses than us.
Oh yeah, That's what I'm saying. Right? They're very successful.
Yeah, they're like 50 million, billion dollar business owners. Yeah.
So the reason that I'm bringing this up is because this is not their first rodeo either. They've been around the block a few times. They understand how things work. But here's something that some people may not realize. You have to be careful who you ask advice from because there's not everybody that knows this. And you would think to yourself, well, that can't be true. It's 100% true. There are accountants and CFOs that do not understand this, and they react to it in a horrific way that very often destroys the businesses that they think that they're trying to protect because they think that a recession is all about the numbers and they don't understand the propaganda in it. They don't understand the intention of people behind it. They don't understand the emotional response that goes into it. They don't necessarily, they think that opportunity is just too risky right now to do. Right. So they're trained to do a job in a very specific way, right? Yeah, so let's not make them bad for that. That's good, but that does not mean that they know how to get through because they're financial people don't automatically think that they know how to get through a crisis because they don't all necessarily know how to do that.
Right. And this was a huge shift for me. And I heard you say this. I don't even know when it was. I think it was actually back in 2008 or 2009 when we were doing Recession Rescue.
Well, if I'm 35, I had to be 15 then?
You said it's not like money just disappears during a recession.
Yeah.
Like you get this feeling during a recession that there's just no money. Like nobody has any money. And that's not the case, right? There's still money in circulation. It's just being spent in a different place. And I remember this experience in 2008 when everyone's like, oh, no one's spending any money. We're in a recession, anything. And we traveled to an event and we stayed at a really high end, I think it was like a Ritz-Carlton, somewhere really high end, beautiful hotel.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a single empty room. And there were people walking around everywhere. And I'm thinking, somebody didn't tell these people that there's a recession going on.
Exactly.
Right? Like the hotel's booked and people are spending money and they're in the restaurants. And I think it was Vegas, actually.
Yeah, it was Vegas.
And it was just such a stark contrast to like what we're being told about the recession.
So here's something that's interesting about that comment that you're making. So this was a big thing that I was telling people about consistently, because we were doing a tremendous amount of business in Vegas in those days. Mm-hmm. It was very lucrative for us to do business.
To do seminars there. Yeah, we did live events there all the time.
Yeah. But what was interesting was if the higher quality places that you would stay were completely packed, but if you went to the middle class hotels, it was sparse.
Oh, like a Holiday Inn, or
or even the lower casino stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
The ones that are just, they're middle class. That's who their market is, right? They're not
because these people are on fixed incomes,
right?
Like they are affected by the price of cauliflower.
Exactly.
Right?
So that was part of the interesting thing that was so that was so wild. We're staying at this one Ritz that's basically off the strip. It was astounding. And the place is packed, right? And there's celebrities in there, and it's vibrant and it's alive. And if you went to any of the upper end casinos, people were at the tables and they were playing, and there were, we went to concerts and we went to shows, and restaurants were full. But if you went down to a little bit of the lower end stuff, not so much. So I remember distinctly having, every time I would go in those years, the guy, whoever picked me up that was going to drive me around, I would say to the person, how's business? And depending on what that person's clientele was, you got a different answer. Some people would say, we're freaking packed, man. Like it's crazy busy. But if somebody had, like, for instance, if you took a car versus getting in a cab driver will tell you, it's not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much going on. But hire a car, totally different story, right? Totally different value perspective for those individuals. So the idea is that, again, what you said, it's not like the money went somewhere. The money shifted places. And that's very often what happens during these times. The money moves in different directions, but it always moves. Everybody is always buying. Even the people that are in survival mode, they're buying.
They're still buying.
They're still buying. It's just that they're buying different things, or they may be buying a little bit less of different things, or looking for the right kind of discount in order for them to buy. Right. So understanding this mentality of your client helps you make very solid decisions in what it is that you're doing. Like I really wish that we had the ability to reach more people during the COVID crisis than we did. But I think we would have had to know ahead of time exactly what was going to happen in order to do that. But all these people that lost their businesses, it was absolutely not necessary for them to lose their business.
I agree.
Right? But they got in such fear, and they had handcuffs put on them about what they thought they could do. They just got paralyzed. But if they had somebody that could actually see past their problem and reinvent what they wouldn't have had to go out of business.
So I want to go back to, because we got just a few minutes left here. I want to go back to this original question that was posed. She says, I've got a team of 12, some whom are scared. I'd like to keep this light and bright. So it's one thing for you to know this, right? How do you help your team navigate this?
I think you teach them stuff. I think you teach them. If I know, like, if you're
have them listen to this podcast.
Yeah, have them listen to this podcast. Do a little bit of work, understand it yourself. You could possibly bring somebody in to explain it to them, but sit down with them and say, listen, I'm going to give you some information that's going to help you navigate this, right? Because the team's probably on a fixed income, but they don't have to be worried. They don't have to be scared. They don't have to be afraid for their job. They don't have to be affected by this in any way. They can actually, if they have a little bit of savings, maybe you could help them find something where they can expand their wealth a little bit. But I think that you teach them, right? You teach anybody that's opening to listening. Unfortunately, you can't do much with people that are going to be so sucked into the news that they can't hear anything else, or they're just going to sit and argue with you, right? But the average team, that's what I would do. Ask them to come listen to our podcast. We're happy to, let them listen to what they think or what we're saying. Happy to help anybody that needs help. But go look for people that have answers, right? Not complaints. That's the idea. And expose your team to it.
Yeah. That's what I think. That's what I think is a downfall of many, is that instead of gathering evidence of what's possible, they gather evidence of why it's not possible.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So the idea is to begin gathering evidence of how it is possible. And I mean, you and I, we bring in the laws, right? That's the truth. Like There can't be something bad without a gift or an opportunity in it. Like it's just not possible. There has to be an upside somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can only see that if you're willing to not get sucked into the gloom and doom. Right. All of the why this is going to be a terrible thing. That doesn't mean that the recession's not happening. It is. And there's inflation. There's changes in the market. There's all those things. But that doesn't mean that you have to be a victim of it. You actually have, and you always say, your greatest power is the power to choose. You have the power to choose how you're going to show up in this situation and how you're going to look at your business in this during this time.
Absolutely.
Knowing that in 10 years it'll be back. So
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It will.
In some way, shape, or form.
There's no question it'll be back. It has to because the economy is a cycle in and of itself. And that means that it has to cycle in order to stay healthy. Anything, right? Your body has to cycle to stay healthy. A business has to cycle. An economy has to cycle. It has ups and downs, right? Our bodies get sick when we're exposed to too much of one thing versus another. So it's an attempt to rebalance. That's all any kind of an economic crisis is. It's an attempt to rebalance. And here's something that people really don't understand is we live in a self-correcting marketplace, right? Our capitalism is set up to self-correct so that if you just leave it alone and you don't screw with it, it will self-correct itself, right? Because what it does is it moves opportunity. People use that opportunity. That's what entrepreneurs do. We use opportunity. We find ways to make money. We find ways to re-inject interest and capital back into the marketplace with help, what helps it become healthy again. It self-corrects.
I think that's a great place to end this podcast.
Perfect. Let's go to Vegas. All right. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. It was a really interesting topic. It's intrigued me for many years, and I'm always really happy to be able to help people navigate through something like this, because this is one of the things where you don't have to know everything to have a big impact and be able to change the direction of how this is affecting you. So tell your friends, family, other business owners to listen to this. Hopefully it'll help them, and we'll see you on the next Successful Mind podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Successful Mind podcast. If you like what you've heard and you want to know more, go to lifeisnowinc.com.